Have you ever had the quiet, nagging suspicion that God is holding out on you? That the real life, the free one, the good one, the one where you finally get to be happy, is somewhere on the other side of a line he told you not to cross? You'd never say it out loud in church, but late at night it whispers. His rules are the only thing standing between me and the life I actually want. If you've ever felt that, I need you to know something. That feeling is not new. It is the oldest lie ever told to a human being. And the whole reason your world feels broken traces back to the first two people who believed it. Remember where we left off. A world spoken into order. A garden. Two people made in the image of God, naked and unashamed, walking with him in the cool of the day. No fear, no hiding, no gap between them and their maker. And right in the middle of that garden stood one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, with one command attached: don't eat from it. Not because God was stingy. Every other tree was theirs. This was the single place where they could say to God, with their actions, we trust you, and you get to define what's good, not us. Then a new voice enters the story. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. Crafty. Not loud, not violent, subtle. He doesn't come kicking down the door. He comes with a question. And listen to the question, because it's a masterpiece of manipulation. He said to the woman, "Did God actually say, 'You shall not eat of any tree in the garden'?" Catch what he's doing. First, he twists it. God never said they couldn't eat of any tree. He said they could eat of all but one. The serpent reframes God's enormous generosity as a single mean-spirited restriction. He makes the one no louder than the 1,000 yeses. But underneath the twisted words is the real attack. The question isn't really about fruit. It's about God's character. Did God really say that? Is he really the kind of God you can trust? Is he good, or is he keeping the best from you? That's the hook in your heart too. Before anyone breaks a command, they first start to doubt that the one who gave it actually loves them. The woman pushes back at first. She repeats the command, but the serpent stops hinting and goes for the throat. But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." There it is, the whole lie in 2 sentences. First, you will not surely die, a flat denial that sin has consequences. And second, the deeper one, God knows. He's painting God as a rival, as if God's command was never protection, it was self-protection. As if God is threatened by you, holding you down, terrified you'll rise up and become like him. And then the promise that has wrecked the human race ever since. You will be like God. You won't need him to define good and evil for you. You can be your own God, your own authority, the center of your own universe. That's what sin actually is, underneath every version of it. Not just breaking a rule, trying to take God's chair. So she looks at the tree again, but now she's looking through the serpent's eyes. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Don't rush past 4 small words. Who was with her? Adam wasn't off in another part of the garden. He was standing right there, silent, watching, doing nothing. The first sin wasn't only a grab, it was also a man who should have spoken and didn't. They take, they eat. And for one heartbeat, maybe it feels like the serpent was right. Their eyes really are opened. But what they see is not what they were promised. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. The first thing the knowledge of good and evil gives them is shame. They reach for godhood and come up holding fig leaves, suddenly desperate to cover up, to hide who they really are. That's the trade every time. The lie sells you freedom and hands you a fig leaf. Then comes the sound that changes everything. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. The footsteps they used to run toward, they now run from. The relationship they were made for now feels like a threat. This is what sin does. It doesn't just make you guilty, it makes you hide. And here's the moment the whole Bible turns on. The God they betrayed comes looking, and his first word to fallen humanity is not a sentence, it's a question. But the Lord God called to the man and said to him, Where are you? He's God. He knows exactly where Adam is. So why ask? Because the question isn't for his information. It's for Adam's heart. It's the question of a father walking through the house calling for a child who's hiding. Where are you? The very first thing God does after sin enters the world is go searching for the sinner. That single question tells you who God is. We ran, he pursued. Watch what happens when God draws it out of them, because it's the truest mirror of the human heart you'll ever read. God asks Adam what happened, and Adam says, "The woman whom you gave me, she did it." In one breath, he blames his wife and blames God for giving her to him. Then the woman blames the serpent. Nobody says the two words that could have begun to heal it. I sinned. This is the second half of what the fall does to us. First, it makes us hide. Then it makes us blame. We will point at our spouse, our parents, our circumstances, our wiring, even at God himself. Anything but stand in the open and own it. The instinct to say it's not my fault is not a modern psychological quirk. It is the oldest reflex of a guilty heart, right here on page 3. And it would be a hopeless scene, except God doesn't leave them in it. Because buried inside the curse God speaks over the serpent is the first promise of the gospel, the first ray of light in the dark. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. A child of the woman is coming. The serpent will strike his heel. He'll be wounded. But that same child will crush the serpent's head, a fatal blow. From the wreckage of the fall, God announces a rescuer. Thousands of years before Bethlehem, the very first gospel is preached in the words of a curse. And then God does something tender and terrible all at once. And the Lord God made for Adam and for his wife garments of skins and clothed them. Their fig leaves weren't enough. They never are. So God himself covers their shame. But to make those garments, something had to die. The first death in the Bible is an innocent creature, killed so that guilty people could be covered. That's a shadow stretching all the way to a cross, where the true innocent one would die so that you could finally be clothed, not in fig leaves you stitched, but in a righteousness God gives. The covering you keep trying to sew for yourself, he has already made. So come back to that suspicion you started with, that God is holding out on you. Here is the answer the whole story gives. The serpent said God was withholding the good life, but look at what God actually withheld. Nothing. He gave a garden, gave a promise, gave a covering, and in the end gave his own son. The God you suspected of keeping the best from you is the God who kept back nothing, not even himself. The lie always frames God's boundaries as a cage. The story shows they were a fence around a cliff. Adam and Eve didn't step over a line into freedom. They stepped off an edge into exile, shame, and death. Every time that whisper comes back, real life is on the other side of what God said. Remember, it's the same voice, telling the same lie that emptied the only paradise we ever had. And here's the grace in it. When you've already believed the lie, when you're already hiding behind your own fig leaves, God's first move toward you hasn't changed. He still walks into the garden. He still calls. He's still asking the oldest question of all. Where are you? Not to condemn you, but to find you. Here's the whole thing in one sentence. The fall is what happens when we believe God is holding out on us. But the God we run from is the one who comes searching and gives up everything to bring us home. Where are you? He's still asking, not because he's lost you, because he wants you to stop hiding. But sin, once it's in the world, doesn't stay in one heart. In the very next chapter, it moves from a garden to a field, and from a piece of fruit to a brother's blood. That's where we're going next. If this opens something up for you, subscribe so you don't miss it. Because the story of how everything broke is also the story of how God refused to leave it broken. We'll see you in the next one.